I find after 35 years investing, and I don't think I'm alone in this, that it is a challenging field. It is going to challenge you. You're going to have things that work and then you're going to have things that fail. And I think we try to put out analogies like, oh, it's like baseball, right? You hit 6 out of 4, you're going to miss. And that doesn't feel good as a professional baseball player. Like, how many baskets does Kobe Bryant actually make? And how many baskets of those are the winning point to the game? And you miss as many as you make. But when you have to live in that, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 15, 1 out of 20 are going to fail, are going to not work. You're going to end up having to face your investors, and you're going to have to say something to them, and you're going to have to do a capital call, or you're going to have to fix it before your investors find out. How do you deal with that? That's not IQ, and that's not even necessarily pure raw experience. That's mindset. That's who you are and why you're in the business, and your capacity to understand what you're doing. I am Christina Suter, and this is the Real Estate Breakthrough Show, where we talk about the reality of real estate, the mindset you need in order to face the reality of what it is, and tips and tricks to get you moving forward in investing. I am your host, Christina Suter. Hey you, this is Christina Suter with Real Estate Breakthrough. We are here with Ryan Smith, one of my favorite people on the planet. Ryan and I were just talking about how we don't really see each other very often, but I think we recognize each other every time we do get together and get to see each other. Big hug, so glad to see you. Ryan's among my favorites because of the fact that he runs a business that offers a variety of useful things to you as an investor, but also is a Christian-based business that is really interested in being able to serve the community. So we're going to have some conversations about that today as well, which we don't always have. So Ryan, welcome to the show. Why don't you bottom line your history for a moment?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always good seeing you. And I always like keeping up with the flare, the color of your flare, which is blue, and I love it. So bottom line history, and I'll treetop it for you. I'm a former coder. I wrote software for many years. I'm an athlete, got drafted by the Orioles and the Angels for baseball. Kind of general nerd, love people, and I've learned to put that all together, and gratefully in a real estate business where my wife and I started about 23 years ago, acquiring mobile home parks, added storage along the way. And so we own and operate a portfolio of mobile home parks and storage facilities across the country, and get to serve a lot of wonderful people in the process of doing it.
Yeah, and it's fun that you guys were there, 20 years ago, because a lot of people were in multifamily 20 years ago, including myself, guilty as charged. So, but you guys actually started in the field that I feel like people are now jumping from multifamily specifically into mobile home parks and storages. Are you finding that pretty much to be the case?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, yes, as a general theme, I think the trend is in our favor in terms of the institutionalization of both asset classes. More and more capital continues to come to kind of the shores of manufactured housing and storage, certainly. And then you have this other subset, which are more opportunistic players. They're kind of always bouncing around to whatever the hottest trend is, and so you'll see them cycle in and cycle out. But I think the general theme is it's definitely gotten less mom and pop in the 20 some odd years we've been at it.
And the reason why I highlight that is because years and years ago, when I first started in multifamily, you could buy a 5 to 50 unit multifamily building in LA. There was a 7 cap that actually, did well. And you were buying it from a mom and pop. You weren't buying it from somebody who was a professional in the field, people who made it, their business to own $500 million to $1 billion worth of multifamily. The Michael Blancs, Ellie Perlman, Ken McElroys of the world. And those are kind of all slightly different sizes, but you get the basic gist of it. And it really did price me as a smaller investor out of the market when I sold my buildings during the downturn because of personal reasons and wanting to get pregnant. I was newly married, and I wanted to stop being so stressed. I wanted to actually have a baby. So I sold everything because I wanted to be less stressed. I haven't really had a chance to buy back in. So the professionalization of the multifamily field specifically has changed the way that the cap rate has behaved, not just the lower interest rate. The lower interest rate was part of that, but it was also the efficiencies, right? Being able to come in. And now there are very few mom and pops in the field, especially in the 100 doors and above. And I've been priced out. The cap rate has been too compressed for me to be able to compete.
Yeah, no, it's definitely things have, cap rates have certainly come down in a lot of asset classes. To your point, especially in major metros where you reside, it's mind-boggling in some senses. But I think a lot of it's also, kind of the Jobs Act, which was 2012, and the kind of the instantiation of Reg D 506C, and the ability to go out and generally solicit and raise capital and from accredited investors. And that's certainly raised a lot more capital for the purpose of deploying into assets, created a pretty big market on the buy side, which is kind of helped accomplish what you're describing. We've certainly seen it in storage and manufactured housing as well. I was talking to a friend of mine last week. I think and I might not be 100% right, but I recall seeing a manufactured housing community trade in the last couple of years. I think it was 2022 for in the ones. I think it was like 1.6 cap, 1.7 cap. Crazy. Yeah, just mind-boggling.
So what I did find was, two points. One is, even when I was buying as a young woman, which would have been literally 30 years ago. Don't tell anybody. Okay, good. Yeah, don't do the math. 30 years ago, they would always list it at a 7 cap or an 8 cap or a 6, and it was never actual. Like, those were never the actual numbers to begin with. So when you say it's listing at a 3 or lower, I'm like, I know those are not actual numbers. I know that it's not even making 1.5 cap or 3 cap. Those are not reality, right? So now you're agreeing to buy a negative cash flow building. And that is the difficulty that multifamily has slipped into until recently, was the agreement to buy a negative cash flow building, counting on the forced appreciation to be one of the primary aspects that allows you to purchase it. But that was not true in your field. Your field has not experienced that level of professionalization. It's one of the advantages, I feel like, in that hitting your field later. So talk about that.
Yeah, you're not wrong. We have seen in recent years, especially post-COVID, we did see a lot of deals trade that would have been negative leverage, as you're describing it. So it certainly has hit our space a little bit. So there's a lot of execution risk. On you've got to force that appreciation, grow the NOI, or it's not that the deal doesn't work. So you really gotta execute. So that's, but not as much as from what I've seen, to your point, as in multifamily. And almost to your point, when we got started in manufactured housing many years ago, I mean, cap rates were, and I don't even want to say it because people won't believe it as true, but I mean, when we first started, cap rates were in the 20s. I mean, I'm not, that's not hyperbole. I mean, you could buy a property, a mobile home park, for 15 to 25, somewhere in that range. I mean, not of quality and rural, and probably some park-owned homes, but it was unbelievable. It's unbelievable. A lot of those deals are gone.
Right. So what do you guys do today with the fact that you can't buy in that type of range where it's a cap rate of 15 or 20? I even have a hard time saying 20, so I have to say 15 first. So what do you find today is part of the secret sauce of your company, and how you guys make deals continue to be successful in an environment that gets tighter and tighter?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think if I could go back, if I had a choice to go back to those days, I'd say no. And I'd stick with where we are now, because there's a lot that we've learned, and I'll describe it just so that's not like, I won't leave that statement there.
Right. Yeah, no, tell us more. How can we learn if you don't share?
I mean, no. So, I mean, so in short, there's kind of two sides of the coin. On one side, you have very high cash flowing deals, which are those, I'll say the 15 cap rate. You have a lot of investors who generally, when they're new or newer, they might be coming out of a W-2 job. They're looking to replace income. So their sole focus is cash flow. So they have a preference to properties that produce as much cash flow as possible. And to the extreme, they may be taking on a lot of risk in the way they're generating the cash, which is why it's trading at 15 to 20, cap. So as I kind of, I say the word mature, as I matured in the business, my friends would crack up and they would laugh if they heard me say that. But as I'm kind of,
No, you're not allowed to mature. You're supposed to stay young at heart for forever, but your hair gets more gray.
it's all,
depending,
it's, so I mean, as we kind of matured in the industry, and we've learned a lot along the way, we really value the long-term equity growth potential that real estate affords. And so that's where you're really focusing. Cash flow is important for wealth creation, but it's more about the consistency and the predictability and almost the surety of the cash flow is more important for the purpose of equity creation than the sheer amount of it. And so, I'll boil it down to math just for illustration. But let's just say you have a property at a 10 cap for easy math. $1 of net operating income is worth 10 times, a 10 cap. So every $1 of income you can produce, it's worth $10. And if you can add $1 a month, that's 12 months. So you have $12 a year worth, multiple of 10. So that's $120 right? But if I can buy a property that I think will sustain at a 5 cap, and the reason it might sustain at a 5 cap is because it's in a better location, there's less perceived risk in the location and the asset, more surety around the ability to grow rents, collect rents, keep operating expenses low, all of those things. But if I can sustain at a 5 cap, every $1 a month, that's $12 a year, but now divided by 0.05, 5 cap, that's a 20 time multiple. So now I have a $240 dollar. So and the reason that's important to me is, cash flow is important to a degree, but once you get, beyond a certain threshold of cash flow, it becomes inefficient for tax. From a tax standpoint, you start paying more and more tax. So I'd rather lever cash flow for the purpose of equity creation, because equity is unrealized equity, at least at present, is not taxed until it's realized. And so for me, that's kind of what has guided our kind of our business. And so how that causes me to react and behave is we generally target higher quality, better located, more institutional quality properties that we think we can make a run at, add value to over time, and hold for a long time.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And like when you talk about the stability of the cash flow, so we're talking about a 12-month trailing average. We're talking about the capacity to hold the property steady, being able to make investor payments in a consistent fashion, so investors don't have to worry or be concerned. And the amount of activity that you have to put into actually maintaining that mobile home park is much smoother and easier. So these are all just like non-monetary values or returns on being able to fix and buy a stabilized property, or create and maintain a stabilized property. And I just, I have my own physical world experience of owning, workforce housing that was C, D grade, having the inconsistency in the cash flows, having the building go 50% empty, just to put real world model on it, 50% empty because of a gang problem they've got going in the building. Well, the difficulty of 50%, and maybe I got higher cash flow by buying a CD building in theory, but in the end result, I have higher maintenance, higher just trash. It's amazing to me how much trash, higher just trash, right? Inconsistency in rents, payments, inconsistency in tenants and the capacity to rent the units. And then we end up with specialty problems like drug dealers on my actual building, or the gang next door that's actually, in my parking lot, creating this huge variability in the cash flow itself. That's for me as an owner. Like even at that point, I wasn't leveraging other people's money. I was only using my own money, but I was living on the money because that was my primary job now. So those are all the sort of non-quantifiable effects or advantages of having a good, solid B property that's bringing consistent cash flow with quality tenants that are wanting to stay for a long period, and your ownership is focused on a long period of time. Investors get paid better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And which one of those two properties, or that, the comparison of, I'll say, CD versus B, which one will have more bidding, more bidders, more interest, and so that's where you get a higher multiple, lower cap rate, and it's because the predictability, kind of the surety of the go forward picture of the asset.
Yeah, and I look at older buildings now and I'm like, I just have this feeling of like tired. I look at them and I go, yeah, that's just tiring, but to be light about it, but it is literally the higher expense ratio, right? It is the amount of trash. It is the amount of intensive property management that it gets involved with it. And just, you walk into the building and it's the feeling of the building itself of offering a quality product to quality people for a long-term quality return.
Yeah, and then there's the hybrid folks who their model is to buy that D and fix the problems and put a lot of money and a lot of time, and and maybe make it a C, a B, and kind of arbitrage the difference. So that's the fun thing about real estate, is there's so many different ways you can execute, so many different models depending on the returns you're targeting, the risk you're willing to take, and so that's what makes the world go round.
It is. It's definitely, it's part of what I love about real estate, is that you could be anywhere from an interior designer to an accountant to a project manager to a contractor, and all of you have a job, all of you can buy property, and all of you can be successful, right? Like that to me is exciting. All right, so right now, what do you feel like is happening in your industry? What are you guys facing, whether you're going to talk economically or just something that's industry specific that's shifting in the industry itself?
Yeah, so we sit across really a lot of different. I guess I'll answer the question by bifurcating it to manufactured housing and storage, because they're similar. Yeah, they're similar in a way, but they're different. But I'll say, on the MH side, on the manufactured housing side of the business, it's not much has changed in the 20 some odd years we've been in the business. Demand is far in excess of supply. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think the biggest risk is regulatory, and well-intentioned as it may be. You hear a lot of calls for rent control and some of these things, and certainly there are bad actors that come in and treat people poorly, and we all have good, I'd say we all can point to examples of that, and I think to the extent that regulation can address that, then fine. But I don't think rent control is the solution. And anyway, I don't think that's on our doorstep necessarily, but that's always the risk.
Yeah, no, you're further away from that than I think the mobile home park, or even the Airbnb or short-term model, the single family residence and the multifamilies, I feel like are more under the possibility of regulation moving forward than mobile home into itself, or even storage.
You're right. Yeah, I think it would be. I think it would be bad for the industry, and then ultimately, I don't think it'll fix what it purports to solve for. It'll make things worse, and
we could spend 10 minutes talking about that alone. But please go ahead; it'll make things worse.
Every place that's ever tried it has either unwound it or been unsuccessful in addressing the root cause they were seeking to remedy. But so on the storage side, I think the big thing we're facing right now is, and it's unsurprising, post-COVID, storage was a darling, in really 2021, 2022, as people worked from home. They now needed to take that bedroom, which stored excess stuff, for their garage because they couldn't work out at a gym, so all their extra bonus rooms, bonus spaces were fully utilized. And so storage was a big winner. And then you had a lot of people moving, to kind of suburban, rural environments, and so again, storage was kind of the winner. More recently, since last year, storage has softened, quite a bit since last September. really is when we started seeing it. Because storage typically tends to track kind of movement in single family residential home sales. Obviously, when interest rates started going up precipitously last fall and into the winter months, home sales came to kind of a screeching halt, and so that had an impact on storage. But we see that as a short term kind of thing. It's not abnormal for the industry. We think it might last a couple more months and maybe another year or so, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it is specific to, it's countercyclical as part of the advantage of it. I mean, that's one of the reasons why to invest in mobile home parks and storage units is because they're both inherently countercyclical. People have a tendency, when people are losing homes or losing their wages and they need to move, storage is the thing that's, slurps up the excess. And when everybody gets all settled again and everything is appreciating, we're all so happy with that. Storage now becomes something that is not as required, not as necessary. I'm a horrible person because I have 4 storage units, so I'm your ideal client. I have 4 of them. I have my mother's storage. What?
On behalf of the industry, we thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm personally trying to contribute my little piece as best I can, right? But yeah, I think you'll find that I have to agree with you. It's just going to go ahead and shift. The topic of your talk at Phoebe, right, or later this month, is mobile home parks in this economic cycle. So, how is, you touched on that just briefly, saying actually it's not really cycling that much right now.
No, not at all. I mean, we continue to see pretty incredible demand across the board. There's not really a single area or region where there's low demand. We don't see an area where there's an oversupply or an oversaturation. There's quite a bit of liquidity. People looking to buy a mobile home, as long as they qualify, and there's a lot of options by which they can qualify with a lot of different lenders depending on the state. There's a lot of financing, a lot of access to financing, so people can buy homes and finance homes. And the mobile home manufacturers, the Skylines, the Claytons, the Champions, the Cavcos, they're all making as many homes as they can, and they're quite busy. So I mean, the industry as a whole is pretty robust. It's very active. There's really no impairment we're seeing. There's a little volatility in the economy right now. Not, people aren't quite sure which way it's going to go, whether or not we're in a recession, whether we're heading into a recession. But from what we're seeing in our business, we don't see any signs of it. Collections are good, delinquencies are low, occupancies are strong. So we're not seeing much.
Those are 3 very good indicators. That makes a lot of sense. I think in mobile homes, the regulation unintentionally works for you because they're not intending to create more parks, or most counties are against the concept of having more mobile home parks. So parks are more, if anything's going to happen to a park, it's going to disappear versus a new one showing up.
Correct. Yeah, about 3 miles out my window that way, there was, I think 3-4 years ago, there were 2 mobile home parks. And now there's a Publix shopping center and a Starbucks on the corner, where there used to be 2 mobile home parks just 3 miles. To your point. So the highest and best use for land is generally not a mobile home park or manufactured housing community. They're also not very efficient and effective at generating tax revenue. So local municipalities are not too keen on taking a piece of land and allowing a mobile home park to be developed on it. So to your point, there are in most years, there are more mobile home parks being destroyed or taken out of service than they are placed into service.
It's unfortunate. Well, it is because it serves a particular population, right? It has. I remember in my economics class, in my macroeconomics class in college, I remember them showing like, oh, well, we used to not have welfare and we had this amount of people who are homeless, but then we put in welfare and we didn't actually get rid of, in the end result, 20 years later, we actually didn't get rid of the homeless. We had this almost the same percentage of the population were homeless, and now we had a new social economic class called the welfare class. And so it was intended to do something, but it didn't actually happen. And it did help me understand that there's a sliver that people want to live on, right? And it is the sliver they want to continue to live on, whether they're used to it, whether they earn their way towards it, whether they don't earn their way towards it. It is the sliver that they're comfortable, and it is where they're going to keep wanting to reside. And mobile home parks serves a particular sliver.
Yeah, you got it. About 10% of Americans live in a mobile home. Like, it's not as obscure as people think. It's far more normative, or far more normal of an experience than people think. And it's also a decent, or can be a decent experience. If you were to see some of the new mobile homes we're bringing in our communities, you'd fall over. You would literally fall over if you saw the photos. You'd be like, "There's no way that's a mobile home." And the industry has come a long way.
Yeah, construction's gotten so much better, and the quality of construction has gotten better, and the amenities that they're capable of offering, the durability of what they're creating. It used to be there was a distinct difference, and banks have always noticed the distinct difference between stick-built versus a mobile home, or even modular home. But now they're getting closer and closer. All right, because of time, we're going to change subjects. Let's talk about mindset for a minute. So I specifically include in this show the conversation about, tell me about a deal that went wrong. And the reason why I have that in my questions is because I find, after 35 years investing, and I don't think I'm alone in this, that it is a challenging field. It is going to challenge you. You're going to have things that work, and then you're going to have things that fail. And I think we try to put out analogies like, oh, it's like baseball, right? You hit 6 out of 4, you're going to miss. 6 out of 4, it's the other way around. 6 out of 4, you're going to miss, not hit 6. And that doesn't feel good as a professional baseball player. Like, how many baskets does Kobe Bryant actually make, and how many baskets of those are the winning point to the game? And you miss as many as you make. But when you have to live in that, when you have to live in that 1 out of 10, 1 out of 15, 1 out of 20 are going to fail, are going to not work. You're going to end up having to face your investors, and you're going to have to say something to them, and you're going to have to do a capital call, or you're going to have to fix it before your investors find out. Or you're going to have to face a tornado. I know mobile home parks, I've been talking to some people, like, yeah, Lily, you'll hit a tornado and you literally have to fix it, or a hurricane, and you're going to have to fix it in your park. Like, how do you deal with that? That's not IQ. And that's not even necessarily pure raw experience. That's mindset. That's who you are and why you're in the business, and your capacity to understand what you're doing. And how do you stabilize your mindset when you're up against the wall? So either tell me about your mindset work, or tell me about a deal that went wrong, because either one touches on what I'm trying to get people to understand. There's a reality called this sometimes sucks.
Yeah, no question. And I think that's the, I'll maybe go even one step farther, because I think, to your point, there's the episodic challenges. There's those, I'll say tornado in a trailer park, right? Like, it's this too shall pass. It's a short, you lean in, you go to work, you roll up your sleeves, you take care of people, you tell the truth, you do all of those things, and then you should be back to normal, and your life should return to normal. The harder ones that I think people struggle with are the ones that are over a longer duration, where it's more the persistence and the discomfort over time that I think is the bigger struggle. I think, because I think people say, okay, I want to achieve XYZ, which is great, but the hardest part about XYZ is the time they give themselves to achieve XYZ. The time is the biggest variable, right? It's, I want to do XYZ in this amount of time. And I think, Jamie and I, as a team, my wife and I, work together. I'm here and she's down the hall, and, that's a whole other point of conversation, but no, in a great way. Like, I meaning, like, there's this great book called The Power of Two, and how a lot of times, one person like Warren Buffett may get the acclaim, but then there was a Munger, or, Bill Gates, but there was a Ballmer, and Jobs, but there was, anyway, so Jamie and I are, embodiments of that, but it's really helpful to have somebody like my bride, who's also my business partner, especially when you're building something over time, and you have those those questions to say, am I on the right track, or why isn't it happening as fast as I want it to, or those creeping kind of conversations that sneak in and cause you to question whether or not you're doing the right thing. And that's where a lot of times people get on this merry-go-round where they say, okay, well, I see my friend over here doing XYZ, and they jump off their railroad track and they jump on these tracks. And they're always jumping from lily pad to lily pad, and they always feel like they're dancing behind the beat of the music, and they're always they always just missed it, right? When if they would have just stayed on the track, it might not have been on the time that they allocated or thought would occur. But if you would have just stayed on the same track, you would have gotten there. And I know that's been the result in our life. Not many things happen as we would have expected in the exact time we would have expected, but far more than we expected happened because we didn't jump off the tracks. And if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me. I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's not so much just personal experience as again, with, like you're saying, more of an observation. Like, if you try to gain depth of experience, if I, Christina, tried to gain a depth of experience in mobile home parks, I'm behind the power curve in that. I'm behind you, and I'm behind the other people who've been in the field longer than I have. Whereas I'm residential, all day long, single family, multifamily, fourplexes, condotels, hard money loans, seller financing, supporting flippers, flipping properties, flipping multifamily, all of that. Sure. Right? Like, that conversation is something that rolls out of me. And every once in a while people are like, why don't you just do mobile home parks? And why don't you switch over to storage? Or why don't you, and I'm like, or hotels? And I'm like, a restaurant. I'm like, there's no way I'm doing hotels or restaurants, but especially restaurants. Although I do now do midterm rentals and short-term rentals. So that's hospitality. It's as close as I intend to get, right? But I don't intend to try to learn a whole new field. And it's part of why I invest as a limited investor in deals like what the deals you guys offer, because I'm not wanting to jump off my track. I have my track. I've been doing it for 35 years. I love it. I understand it. I succeed in it. I enjoy it. I'm in the process. I'm in 3 different escrows right now, right? Doing it. Like, that's great, right? But if I switched fields, I've got another learning curve. I've got another greater chance for a series of failures, unintentional and unknown, right? Not seeing it beforehand. And I'm putting myself and my investors' money at risk by jumping the track, thinking I'm smarter or faster than either the niche I'm trying to jump into or the people who are already there. And that's just not true. And I'm not saying I'm not smart. Trust me, I am smart enough. I am smart enough and good enough. But I'm literally putting myself in the way of harm if I don't understand that changing can do that. Now, you want to change when you're young. You want to do this, you want to do that, you want to do this, you want to do that. But then there's a point where you double down and you go, there's my track. And you want to stay with that. And then you don't lose momentum because you're in your stream.
I agree. I think, to the extent that somebody wants to change, maybe, and even the hybrid is, like, if you see a better track and you want to change and stay in it, then fine, do that. But what I see so many people doing is it's just kind of a herd mentality going in a circle. It's like Moses in the desert for 40 years where, it took them a long time to get to the promised land because they just kept messing things up. But meaning it's just, I see people who are, it's almost like they believe in the other person or the other people that they're seeing more than they believe in themselves. So I think its core is self-doubt or lack of belief. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to go jump on your track. And then when that doesn't pan out, I'm going to go find another track and at some point you just have to say, you know what, I believe in myself. This is the track I'm choosing and I'm staying on it. And at such time when I believe there's a better track and I then choose that for myself, I might then jump on a track, but it's you making the choice rather than constantly kind of FOMO, like pulling people in 1,000 directions. So that's been very good for us. And my wife has been, has been unbelievably helpful. And, I think us as a team and holding ourselves accountable to staying on course when, either she or I might want to deviate. And it's, so that's where the power of two is really great to have.
Yeah. And it's, I may have to look at that book because it's well, for all kinds of reasons of just, I've had different partners along the way and now I'm entering into new partnerships again. And so it's like a good to remind myself and to re-anchor and intentionally, consciously, thoughtfully, choosing partnership and what that means. Big decision. So what I was trying to highlight, and then I'll ask another question, was just the fact that I choose as an investor to be a limited partner in deals like yours because I don't want to lose my momentum and my capacity. I don't want to lose my focus, and my active investing goes in an area that I understand, and I keep doubling down in that. And if I want to do a mobile home park, or if I want to do, a storage unit, I'm not going to purchase one directly. I'm going to LP in a deal like what you're doing as a way of diversifying my portfolio. Is my version, you can call it my version of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, but it's also my version of diversification. If I'm all residential, all in Indianapolis, which is my current doors are there, then I've got this concentration that may not be as agile at being countercyclical, may not be as agile if there's something that happens in Indianapolis, may not be as agile if that particular asset class, B-class single-family homes, end up having a problem. And so that is the diversification that I count on, is being able to rely on other experts that have that depth of understanding.
Yeah, same. Yeah, we invest in all kinds of things. The software startup we just invested in. We invested in kind of health and fitness industry and a kind of a new concept startup. So yeah, certainly you want to diversify in some ways, and part of it for me is finding people that I know, like, and trust, and put money behind them. The model may or may not work out. I may or may not make money, but one of the biggest risks is the people. Are they going to do the right thing? And trying to keep the risk to the model. Like, if the model breaks down, then that's the risk I took. Where I don't want to lose money is on the people.
It's on the people, and that is hard in a contemplation. And I teach due diligence on syndications, and it takes hours for me to teach it, and it takes hours, even more hours, for me to implement it. But I think one of the things that's behind mindset, to double back to that for a minute, is, what's your, you can call it faith, you can call it religion, you can call it spirituality, you can call it a greater good. Personally, I don't care if you call it Buddha, you call it Moses, you call it Christ. I don't care what you call it, or just Mother Nature, right? Jung called it the universal consciousness. I don't care what you call it. But for me, I know that's part of my stabilization in my life. That's part of my constant faith. In my master's program in psychology, they had a sign on the wall that said, "Spirit meets you at the point of action." So put your version of spirit in there, right? God, Moses, Buddha, pick your one, right? Meets you at the point of action. So it's being willing to engage, being willing to be responsible for creating your world, being willing to stand up as a leader in your environment, or just even in your own personal life, and knowing that there's a higher good, a higher purpose, or higher creator. And I know you guys actively discuss that and are part of that in your business.
Yeah, for sure. So Jamie and I and are followers of Jesus Christ, and I'd say, he met me. If you believe who he is, who he says he is, and he did what he said he did, then he met me and did a great deal for me long before I even had the opportunity to fail. And it really informs everything we do, because ultimately, if, again, taking this point of belief and drawing the line forward, if you believe he is who he says he is, and he did what he said he did, then every person on the planet is an image bearer of him, and it's called Imago Dei, is an image bearer of Christ. And so if then how should I treat my residents? Everybody's an image bearer. Everybody. There's not a person who doesn't bear Christ's image. And so who am I to serve? everybody. Who served me? Christ. He washed feet. He created all things, knew all things, was all powerful, and he washed feet, right? So washing feet is not beneath me. And so if everybody's Imago Dei, they deserve my best, and they deserve my best because he gave me his best. He died on a cross for my sins. He gave me his best when I didn't deserve it. Say that should, and so really the gratitude of what I have, what he gave me that I didn't deserve, should cause me to move forward out of gratitude, not out of, well, God wants me to be successful and God wants me to be rich for all I do these things as a thank you, right? Because I have today far more than I deserved in his sacrifice. Everybody's an Imago Dei. So moving forward, that should show itself in my business, right? If I believe any of those things, then that should, in very simple terms, it should lead me to treat, our teammates here better and differently than maybe they've been treated in other places, and our residents and our stakeholders, and anyway. So yeah, it's a big part of what we do and why we do it.
So I went through probably 2 or 3 years worth of just a simple practice. And sometimes when I tell people about it, I think I should get back to that. Of just every night opening up my journal and saying, am I on course, God? Am I fulfilling my purpose, God? Because that's what I'm here for, right? That's my faith. That's my belief.
Yeah. And thank you for grace.
And thank God for grace. I mean, literally, thank God for grace. Like
all grace. If it had to be, if it was performative, if heaven or forgiveness was performative and based on our ability to perform, that would be crushing.
That would be crushing. That would be literally soul crushing. I think it is soul crushing when you believe that's what you've got. When you believe people love me, value me because of the money I have, or people love me and value me because of the thing I can bring them, connections, money, projects, that my value is based in my capacity to earn, create on the physical level. Guess what? You're kind of screwed. And the reason why you're kind of screwed is because physical level moves. Hurricanes come and go, and they are not necessarily about you. They're about the consciousness of that place. They're about the people that are affected by that. They're about us rising up to do more of God's work, to be more clear, to be more giving, to be more generous. It's not just you and your particular home and your particular life. There's a much bigger action going on here that I personally believe is God directed, right? So if you find that your value, if you relate to your value as being that, you're going to have a hard time. Every time life moves, you're going to be confused, and you're going to wonder what you did wrong, or you're going to wonder how to get out of it. You're going to wonder how your value has now increased or decreased in that moment because of something that moved physically. And that's just a very vulnerable place to be.
I agree. And I think, and I have to remind myself this, and I'll give a book recommendation on the tails of this, but I mention this because I remind myself this all the time, that to me, a lot of times that anxiety that creeps in, or that self-doubt, is when you put expectations into the future, where, the Christian faith, or the faith that I hold in specifically Jesus Christ, that's a historical event, right? So like my identity is rooted in what happened as a point of history. It's not contingent based on an outcome and a point in the future. It's not a conditional if this occurs, then I will be loved. If this is it's not a future conditional, it's a historic fact.
Because it happened already, it becomes given.
It's not that there's no condition. It's happened. Now the question is, do I believe it happened? There's a point of belief that somebody has to wrestle with, but to the extent that you get to that point of belief, and there's a lot of historical evidence that can be processed, but once you get to that point, it's a point of history. which is helpful to me to remember. And then the book reference that has helped me a ton. I actually used to travel with 5 to 10 copies in my bag all the time, and I'd hand them out to people on planes. It was written by J.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Hobbit, and it's called Leaf by Niggle. It's a short story by J.R. Tolkien. And long story, I'll make this super short, but I think it's from mindset, it's helpful. So he was a linguist. He was a professor. He was a linguistics professor, and he had this concept of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, in his head. And he wanted to write a book and wanted to put this on paper. And at the time, he was in World War II. The Nazis were bombing out the buildings around him, and he literally thought he was going to die, having fully created this story in his head that he hadn't put on paper yet. And so high anxiety, stress, right? So he stopped and wrote a book called Leaf by Niggle, which is mind-boggling to me. He actually stopped to write a book about the lesson he learned rather than writing the book he was anxious about not writing. So this book, Leaf by Niggle, it's a story, and I'll summarize it very briefly to get to the point. But the story is about a painter named Niggle, and he has this vision. He feels called to paint this scene that he has in his head. It's a beautiful tree in a field with mountains in the background, just majestic, beautiful scene. He starts painting. He paints a leaf that would go on the tree, so on and so forth. Long story short, he dies. And all he completed was a single leaf that was to go on this tree in this field, mountains. And in the story, he dies and he comes across this path in the afterlife, and before him is that scene he was supposed to paint. He never completed it this side of heaven, but on the other side of heaven was the completion of all the things he set out to do. And so he actually got to experience, live in, and kind of wander in that scene. And the reason why that, the point of the book is the completion of everything is heaven, right? Is the other side of eternity. And why that's important is, I think sometimes for me, I feel an unbelievable kind of self-induced pressure to accomplish and to strive and to do all of these things because, time is limited. And I've only, my kid, all the things that creep in and all the calendar items and schedules. And I read that book once a year, and it's 40 pages, super simple, super short, because it's a reminder that the completion of all good things is on the other side of eternity. Sure, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to be diligent. I'm going to be a good steward. I'm going to do all of those things. But at the end of the day, I don't contribute to anything to heaven, right? Like heaven is like, I don't lay a brick in heaven, right? Heaven, so to me, I'm here doing my best, serving the Imago Dei with excellence as out of gratitude for what has been given to me. But at the end of the day, God will create, or God will complete anything that I did wrong or didn't finish this side of eternity. So it kind of is a pressure release valve. That book has been for me. So I've enjoyed it.
On that note, thank you, Ryan. So appreciate it. Thank you for coming to Phoebe. You're coming later this month. I look forward to it. Thank you, my listeners. So Ryan, how do people get a hold of you? If people want to invest with you, people want to know more about your philosophy, how do they find you?
Yeah, call me anytime. My number is 407-602-7662. And then my email is ryan@elevationcg.com.
Thank you, Ryan. So appreciate. Looking forward to seeing you. This is Christina Suter on Real Estate Breakthrough. Hopefully you learned something new today, something whether it's about mindset or whether it's about the actual tips, tricks of real estate in itself. You can find us on all kinds of channels, but what's most important is I am Christina Suter. You can find me at christinasuter.com helping you find your real purpose through real estate.